Okay. All right. This week we'll be discussing the Parshat Beha'alotcha in Numbers, which begins with chapter 8. There are several subject matters that we're going to discuss tonight, and we'll begin with a matter that was discussed in a previous lecture concerning the astral influences and the way the Jews were encamped. If you recall, there was Yehuda on the east side and Ruvain was on the west side, both accompanied with two other tribes. And then the leader of the north side was Dan, and the leader of the west side was Ephraim. And we raised the question, what is the purpose of informing us how these Jews sat around when they weren't doing anything, and in what position they were when they weren't doing anything? Of what importance? Does the Torah have to import on this kind of recess? That means in between their travels, this is the way they were resting. And we discussed that actually the tale itself has really no meaning, and certainly of no importance to us, because that's true. As the Zohar says, of what importance is it where they were encamped? And so we began to understand, and we discussed just one aspect of the flags, and that was the flag of Yehuda. And here again, there seems to be almost a repetition of all that was described in the Parshat Bamidbar. Why the repetition? And the simple answer is, as the Zohar himself says, and to make our proper connection, we shall read from the Zohar to understand on various levels just what the cosmic code, the Torah, is implying. In this week's Parsha, it also says, "V'yom hakim et hamishkan." In other words, first, and I quote from chapter 9 in Beha'alotcha, chapter 9, verse 15. "And on the day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle." In other words, when they established the Mishkan, then this cloud that we have discussed on many occasions covered the Ohel Ha'edut, the ark, because as you already know, the significance of the ark was, as we might say, the energy station, or the location of where, on a physical corporeal level, as we find ourselves, that acted as the antenna and receptacle for the most awesome power of the universe. And that is what the Jews, by the virtue of the ark, came into the position of roaming wherever they preferred, without, it appears, any fear of being overtaken by the other nations, because of the power of the ark. And so the cloud was not merely just a cloud, but it represented that direct connection, which in meditation we generally refer to as making connections, whether it's the Hebrew alphabet, whether the words of the Siddur. At that time, there was no necessity for any of the connections. The connections were automatic by virtue of the cloud. The cloud stood out as a physical representation of all metaphysical connections. And therefore they were in this position to be as powerful as they were, and without any fear. You would think if they had no fear, then they really shouldn't have any troubles, because essentially the only problem that people face in this terrestrial realm is the fear. Fear of tomorrow, fear if they'll have enough, fear if there'll be enough, fear of the unknown, whatever it is, it's fear. And because the Jew was provided with such a connection to the awesome power of which we call certainty, meaning there was nothing that was left to doubt, and nevertheless, we will shortly discover that for whatever reason, that was not enough of a reason to make the Jew feel content. He was something special. Not even the ark could, for him, provide all of the necessities of life. And as soon as the tabernacle was established in chapter 9, he then goes on to chapter 10 and discusses the way they were encamped. So as I said before, we will read the Zohar just to make the proper connection. Uviyom hakim et hamishkan. I'm reading from page 33 in the Sulam of the Zohar Parshat, the portion of the week of Beha'alotcha. Rab Chia patach. Rab Chia began by saying, Pizan natan le'evyonim sitkato omedet lo'ad kano tarum bekavod. And the Zohar says, this is a verse found in Tehillim, and the Zohar says, just what does it mean? Pizar natan levyonim, meaning he spreads out and he gives to the poor. So he says, what does pizar mean? Umeshav hu kamo she'ata omer, yesh mefuzar v'nosaf od, ve'shalom shelakol mefazed hu kach. In other words, what the establishment of the Mishkan was to provide not only the Jew, but all of mankind, whatever their necessities might be, through the Mishkan, through the tabernacle, which ultimately was brought into a greater fruition by virtue of the Bet HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple, that the poor would be totally provided. And poor doesn't mean someone who is monetarily lacking, but it meant poor in whatever respect one might find themselves in lack. The Mishkan took care of everything. That is the way the Zohar understands this pasuk. And it says, Mayu v'nosaf, and he says, an addition. Well, what more do you need than if your needs are totally provided with? What is lacking now? If every moment you begin to think of what you might anticipate could bring some unhappiness, some lack, some defect, if that's all been provided for, what does v'nosaf mean? Ela makom hazeh sheshora bo meisad ha'ana malchut. But there was still one other aspect. One still fears death. Of course, death is not the first thing that comes to our minds. For most people, the fear of want, need, uncertainty comes first. It's only maybe when you get really old that you begin to understand that there could be a possibility of another fear. Although that doesn't preclude that young people do not die as well. And so he said that this Mishkan was going to provide shitoseh b'chayim shel mala. And it also provided life. It also provided eternal life. Amar Rab Yehuda, Amar Rab Chia, Amikra Me'ir, and this verse indicates this, Shekol mi shenoten tzedakah levyonim, mitore es hachayim shehu zeir anpin. For everyone who gives tzedakah to the poor, meaning real poor, he arouses the tree of life, which is zeir anpin, lo osif chayim le'ilan hamavet, and therefore he provides its life to Malchut, which is our terrestrial realm where death exists, because death on another level does not exist. Let's say Moshe. While it seems that Moshe died, Moshe did not die. He might have disappeared, and maybe for us, he doesn't seem to exist within our realm, but that, says the Zohar, is an illusion, because Moshe did not die. Moshe did not die. And therefore, va'az nimtzah chayim v'simcha lamala. And so the one who gives tzedakah, and through tzedakah he brings eitz hachayim, and therefore he takes away the ilan hamavat from our midst. Yet we have a question that we can raise. If tzedakah seems to be an aspect of bringing life, and that was indicated by this verse, because the Mishkan, which contained the ark, and the ark was the direct connection, and therefore death had no place. Yet we find many people who give tzedakah, give tzedakah, give charity to poor people, and yet death still prevails. It even prevails for those people who, out of generosity or for ulterior motives, give tzedakah. Then you might say, well, maybe he's giving tzedakah for an ulterior motive. He wants to remain alive. If it says tzedakah tatzil mimavet, that by providing someone with charity, a poor man with charity, that will save him from death. But you can say, if that's what he's looking forward to, then he is giving with an ulterior motive. And maybe that's why sometimes it does not help. But that is also not correct, because the Talmud relates that Jeremiah, when he saw the destruction of the temple coming, he pleaded and implored the mercy of Hashem. He says, please send a true poor man, because if you can send that true poor man, then all of the Jews will be saved by permitting them to give charity to this poor man. Which indicates that Jeremiah was seeking out a poor man so that the tzedakah tatzil mimavet can actually come about. In other words, if there is this advent of giving charity, although there could be an ulterior motive, as indicated by Jeremiah, the fact that it is with an ulterior motive, nevertheless, it will save a person's life. It will bring him life. The question is why? Because the Gemara, and as well as the Zohar, says, Ani chashuv kemet. A poor man is considered like a dead man. For various reasons, he's considered a dead man. Why is he a dead man? First of all, from a poor man you never hear wisdom, as the rule goes. He could be the wisest in the world, but because he is poor, he is never listened to. He is not dealt with. He is considered as something that doesn't exist, almost to that extent. And so, when someone gives him tzedakah, he at that moment takes him out of that position of death and into feeling good, like he doesn't need anybody. At that moment that someone has provided the poor man with his needs, at that moment the poor man does not feel necessity, he does not feel lack. He feels completeness at that moment. And this is what the verse is indicating. That tzedakah, or the ark, provided the Jews with all of their necessities. And by virtue of providing them with all of their necessities, what was the result of that? Was the fact that then life, all necessities were provided with, and therefore life becomes established. Death becomes nullified. The aspect of the poor man becomes nullified, and so did the ark nullify and cancel out needs, and therefore when there are no needs, the person is alive. It is only the uncertainty, needs, and wants. However, says the Zohar, it appears that by virtue of the Mishkan being established was not enough. The verse goes on to explain, as I said before, how they were encamped in chapter 10. Again, this repetition. And so the Zohar says that it is not sufficient merely to give charity. It is not sufficient to understand that if you give charity, you provide a poor man with his wines, or as the Mishkan with the ark and with the cloud took care of all of the necessities. Why now this business of encampment? Because this encampment meant what? The control of the astral influences. While we can make connections with life, nevertheless, that does not preclude that the stars do not impel. They may not compel, but they still impel. So despite the fact that we could be connected, we could give charity, but it might be the wrong month. It could be the wrong month. It could be the wrong time. It could be that we're under the influence, either personally or globally, we're under the influence of something which is like Tevet, month of Tevet, or the month of Av, or the month of Tammuz, where there are astral influences that despite the fact that we are giving charity, despite the fact that the Mishkan was there, was not sufficient. That by and within itself was not sufficient to create life. In other words, the ark could act as the channel, but it was not sufficient. Why? Because the Jew at that time, and in this portion, is provided with the system by which he makes his connections. He must make that connection. He has a channel called the ark at that time, but that would not have been sufficient. So when we discussed how to control astral influences, we were discussing about praying to the east. And most Jews think just merely by praying to the east, that's enough. But there are many, many Jews throughout the centuries that have been praying eastward, and that for whatever reason did not prevent much of the calamity that has befallen not only the Jew, but all of mankind. And they all prayed to the east. Again, it's like everyone gives charity. And we learned that it's not enough that you just give charity. If there isn't that man that is the proper channel for you, then giving the charity was not sufficient. That's what Jeremiah was implying when he said, send a real poor man. What's the difference if he's a real poor man or not? Staka tasil mimavet. By virtue of giving charity, one should be saved from death, and yet we know it's not so. For all people, it's not so, because most people who are dying or consciously aware of their impending death give charity. And if they give charity, still death seems to be part of the ongoing process of life. So it's not sufficient. Jeremiah says you need a particular person that can act as a channel. Here too, says the Zohar, the fact that there was the Mishkan, the fact that you have a Bet HaKnesset, which is considered to be somewhat of a tabernacle, and the Torah in a miniature way, absolutely a miniature way, because the Torah did not have the power of the ark. It has a power, but not of the ark, and the Torah represents the Luchot, the broken tablets. It again is not on that same level. And there it says we should pray eastward. So we understand from the session we had on astral influences that we were not discussing praying in an easterly direction, because someone who is in the western the eastern side of Jerusalem would be praying west. He would be praying west. So the idea of east meant the central column, meant that aspect that is known as the force, which is compassion, which combines right and left, like in a bulb. The central column, the filament, creates a circuit of energy. And once you have a circuit of energy, there is nothing that can affect you in whatever which way. Therefore, what the Zohar and when the halakha and whatever and the Talmud are referring to praying eastward, it did not mean direction. Just as what is discussed here in chapter 10 of Beha'alotcha is not discussing where they sat, where they encamped. That for us is unimportant, where they encamped. What does that give us today? What did it give the Jews then? That we have to be told where they were encamped. The answer is, the Torah begins off by telling us they were first about who was encamped on the west side, on the east side. We learned that it meant Yehuda, it meant central column, and it also meant Aryeh, lion, and also meant Michael. I don't want to repeat that because anyone who wants to hear that again can go over it. I want to do this evening briefly is establish the codes at least. While, if you will take notice when you have time to look into the Zohar, whether you are familiar with Hebrew or not, I'm continuing to turn these pages all on just a few verses in the Torah. I mean, why does he have to go to such length to explain what all this is about? The answer is simply stated. We are not discussing Vayisa Degel B'nai Yehuda. We're not discussing the flag. We are not discussing encampment. What we are discussing is how we can control our own destiny, despite the fact that we are in a Bet HaKnesset, despite the fact that we have a beautiful Aron Kodesh that the architect just walked in. That by and within itself is not sufficient. The fact that we have a Torah here is not sufficient. You've got to know how to direct energies towards whatever astral influences will be prevalent. The fact that we are in a particular month, in every month, there are positive as well as negative astral influences. Even if you don't take the 3 months that the Zohar says are completely negative, and we generally will never begin anything in those 3 months, and that is, again, Tammuz, the Hebrew month of Tammuz, the Hebrew month of Av, and the Hebrew month of Tevet. But all of the other months have positive and negative influences. And it's towards those negative influences that we want to be certain will not affect us. So if we are going to pray in a Bet HaKnesset, or if they prayed that time with the ark, it wasn't enough. Therefore, in a few more sentences, we are told about the encampment, meaning we are told how to control these 12 astral influences, because on the 4 sides there were 3 tribes each, indicating what? The 12 astral influences. That's why there were 12 tribes, as you already know. So, merely to understand that if you're in a month like, let's say, Tammuz is governed by Yehuda. Now, so many problems developed from that. Why? Because Cancer, which is Tammuz, is a water month. It is Cancer. It is water. Why? Because it's the crab. The crab meaning water. Yet, Tammuz has brought fire. It has brought the beginning of the destruction of the Holy Temple. And then, who rules over the month of Tammuz? Yehuda. Yehuda is a fire sign. And yet, what was the flag of Yehuda? Lion. And lion, we know, don't be so upset, Chaya, because Yehuda was Malchut Beit David, I think. Or was it? Did from Yehuda come Malchut Beit David? Or I'm making, no, okay. In any event, Aryeh, the lion, is the banner. Why is the lion the banner? Lion is what? Is Aryeh, is fire. And yet, the Zohar says Aryeh is chesed. It is the right column. The lion represents the right column. Time doesn't permit it, but at least if I can give you the tool, that you know that if you are discussing a month like, Tammuz, you are discussing a month in which Yehuda reigns, and the way to connect with those three, with this month and its positive influence, not the negative influence that has always existed for the Jew in Tammuz, is to concentrate on Aryeh, because that's a code name for the right column, concentrate on Yehuda, and concentrate on the angel of Michael, because he also is within the encampment of Yehuda. So wherever we have the encampment of Yehuda, we have the 12 tribes, and we've discussed that once before, and anyone who wants to know exactly where the 12 tribes, which 12 tribes govern over which month, it's in the Sefer Yetzirah, and it's readily available. But I took as one example, Yehuda. So, I have coded names. Now, while the Zohar, on these three coded names, goes into a at great length to explain what it means, which we did last time. But at least if you know the month that Yehuda is found, if you know the month that Yehuda is found, if you know the month that Yehuda, who it says here, sat with whom? Yissaschar and Zevulun, the other two tribes, then you know immediately, concentrate that you want to have the support of Aryeh, you want the support of Yehuda, you want the support of the angel Michael. If at its very least, and we explained why it was so. To counteract the negative energy. Intelligence, that is implied, that impels, does not compel, we say. Ein mazal Yisrael. It does not have to compel. But unfortunately, 2,000 years have somehow, yes, compelled the Jewish nation to disaster. It shouldn't be that way, but that's the way, in our experience, it has seemed to evolve. All right, now I want to touch on the degel, the second degel, which is dealt with in the Zohar. Again, to provide you with a little tool, merely the information doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a better life. Information goes a long way, but there are certain aspects that are dealing with our daily lives, and our daily lives, I think, is what the Zohar primarily wants to deal with, more so than teaching you, while we know how important it is to know all about the cosmos and so forth and so on, how they relate to every aspect of life. Nevertheless, since we're dealing with Beha'alotcha, here he discusses what takes place in the month of Yehuda, or the month of Yissaschar, or the month of Zvulun. It says in chapter 10, verse 18, Menasah degel machne Ruvain l'tzivotam. To the south. To the south. And along with Ruvain, you had Shimon, and you have Bnei Gad. Those two who also were encamped with him on where? On the south side. Now I will read from the Zohar. Degel Hasheni, the second flag, Shu Degel Machne Ruven, Hu Machne Mizonayat. Kloma, it deals with war. It deals with war. In other words, enlisting the celestial hosts of war. If you have a problem, people are ganging up on you, for whatever reason, or you're having trouble with your neighbors, whatever might be the case, to concentrate on Degel Machne Ruvain is to enlist the hosts of the order of soldiers, says the Zohar. Kloma, Bebchinat Nesher. The code here is the eagle. The code here is the eagle. The eagle. Ubishlitat Malach Uriel. Now, just as we had in the Eastwood, we had with Yehuda Michael. Now here, in these three encampments, meaning again, Reuven, Shimon, and Gad, those 3 months that you will find on whichever months they rule, these are so far the 3 key words. Nesher, Uriel. Now what does Uriel mean? Uriel, if you know anything about the power of the angels, what does the power of the angels mean? It means an energy intelligence. We discussed this also last time, and I don't want to repeat it. It's another manifestation, says the Zohar. Uriel is the manifestation of the central column. But we already discussed that Yehuda was central column. And this is where astrology becomes very confusing. As we discussed last time, conventional astrology. Why? Because for every positive, there is a negative. And the negative seems to be consistent, like I said about Libra, right? My wife sees everything so thoroughly. But then always at the end says, well, what do you think? What do you mean what I think? I don't even see it as thoroughly as she does. I really don't. And yet she says, well, what do you think? What do you mean what I think? You're the one who sees both sides so clear. She says, that's the problem. Because I see both sides so clearly, I can never make up my mind. Right? So how do you reconcile those two aspects? If one sees everything so clearly, he should be able to come to a clearer decision. What? You mean someone who doesn't see things clearer or clearly and then makes a decision? That's a gamble. That's a guess. Because he didn't see it clearly. He saw one side, and therefore he made a decision. That's better? Of course not. So how do you reconcile both? The answer is because there are many factors. There are many factors. Just as suddenly the Zohar says, what is one of the codes for drawing energy, positive energy? For the south is Uriel, but south we know, and then he says, Ulasad Darom. The degel, the flag of Reuven was to the south. Now the south we know means chesed. That never changes. Darom, south, means chesed. If it means chesed, which means positive energy, right column energy, and therefore Reuven, it fits in with Reuven because he was the firstborn. We know that Reuven rules over Aries. He rules over Aries because Aries is the first month and is the right column of the first section of the first 3 months.
I'm a bit confused here. That's the question. If the first 3, if the Aries is the plus, then the Taurus is a minus, and Gemini would become central, then Cancer should be positive.
Should be right column. That's correct.
So how come it's coming here as a...
No, we finished with Yehuda, right? We finished with Yehuda. And we discussed why we discussed why Yehuda in the last session has to do with the right column. Because only through the central column does the right column become a force. How do we get electricity? Now I'm returning again to what was discussed. How do you get electricity? The minus draws it, but how does it ultimately become manifest? Through the left pole or the right pole? What? It becomes manifest through the right pole. So the fact that you have to know what we're dealing with. We're talking about manifestation. Manifestation comes through the central column. But the central column doesn't make it manifest. The central column acts as a centrifugal force that creates, like the filament, creates a position or a condition by which the right column will now provide us with an abundance of light. But what was the cause of it? The central column. So there are many factors that must be involved that we have to deal with. Now, when I said Aryeh, that's why Yehuda is Aryeh, right column. You have a clue. Aryeh, when you concentrate on Aryeh and you forget all that we have discussed, you don't have the tapes in front of you. What do now? Use the code word Aryeh, line, because that is an embodiment of what? Right column. That's why the Zohar is giving us all of the components that make manifest positive energy. So while Yehuda could be fire and he could be right column, because of right column, that's why he has the Degel Aryeh. This is what the Torah is telling us in such a coded fashion. Unfortunately, that without the Zohar, no one knows what the Torah is all about. Without the Zohar, there is absolutely no meaning. That he has the flag of the Aryeh. He is fire, Aryeh is what? Why the Aryeh? The answer is because included in the manifestation of positive energy of Yehuda, I need the Aryeh, I need the lion as well. Even though he governs over what? The water sign, the crab sign. He's also in the first month. Water is positive. These things all work out beautifully, which we discussed last time. Now we are coming to those other three signs. The three signs that deal with Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. When they rule, what is the way we can connect with positive energy? Even in a Bet HaKnesset, not enough that we are here and we pray. If you don't say the Shabbatenu, or you don't say the Ana B'Koach, I have my questions of whether one is really in his prayer, putting on the tefillin, putting on the talit, and he's not saying the Ana B'Koach, which is the most powerful prayer of all of the prayers. Well, what about the Amidah? Isn't the Amidah considered the most powerful prayer? The answer is yes. The Ark was the most powerful connection to the awesome power, the whole awesome power of the cosmos. So why did we need all this encampment business? Because you can be and have the greatest army in the world. You can have the greatest equipment, like they say about the Arabs. Give them the best equipment in the world. But there could be one thing lacking. What is that? How to make use of it. Right? You could have all the equipment. You can have all the connections. You can have even the lost ark. Right? Let's say they didn't put it away in Washington and, classified as the movie indicated. But we have it right here in this room. What are you going to do with it? How do you implore its energy? How do you make use of it? The fact that it's here, the fact that we're in a holy Bet HaKnesset and you've got the Sefer Torah, you've got the Ark, you've got everything. How do you make use of it? So there are certain prayers. The Amidah is channeling. It is the most powerful, the strongest channel. So what do I want with the channel? I've got it. I've said the Amidah. Right? Most important prayer. What do I do with it? I've got it. I've said it. I've established it. I'm all ready for go. Now what? Ask the person who prays. Now what? You've said the Amidah. Now what? Well, if all he's saying is, God told me to pray, he's done his job. But I don't know how that helps him. He's got to make use of it. Therefore, there is that particular prayer like the Ana B'Koach, which deals specifically with the cosmos. This, and we're going to learn even further in Beha'alotcha, because the whole portion of this weekly portion begins with what? Lighting Beha'alotcha et Hanerot. The high priest lit the candles. What does it mean he lit the candles? And what's this connection with this whole business now. No, they lit the candles. What was that symbolic of? The light was ready. Light was ready. Everything was go. The Mishkan, Hukam, was established. They put the Eidut in there, established. But there's one little incident, you see, that without the Zohar, the Jew never takes notice of. In fact, that's the part you skip. For two reasons. Number one, it was already mentioned in a previous section. And number two, it's a few sentences here which talks about encampment, which seems to be unimportant. But yet the Zohar finds it so important that he devotes more ink to this section than any other section in all of Beha'alotcha, which we will see again, deals with one specific aspect: drawing energy. Drawing energy. So therefore, again, I return to the Degel Hasheni, which means, again, Machne Ruven. Letzad Darom, which is Kav Yamin V'Chesed. And along with this whole idea, he says, Yehuda, Shehen Yehuda, Vehen Ruven. What is the difference between both of them? If Ruven is in Darom, he's in the south. The south means sharing. South means Kav Yamin, right column. We said that Yehuda also represented that kind of idea of right column. He is the first month and ruling over Cancer. Again, in the grouping of three, Yehuda, Tammuz, is in that first grouping, meaning he is right column. So the Zohar is saying, what is the difference between the two? And here lies the secret. They are not exactly alike. If they were exactly alike, there would be no reason for both of them to exist. Shehen Yehuda v'hen Ruven klulam b'beis b'chinat sheim kav hamsi v'kav yamin. They are both inclusive. They are both inclusive. Are both right and left. Do you remember we said Nesher? For those of you totally unfamiliar with the aspect of Chayot HaKodesh, which means the holy beasts. That's a word used in translations. Whether it's in the in Nach, in Yecheskel, the prophet Ezekiel, who mentions the four beasts, and the Zohar mentions the four beasts. What does four beasts mean? First of all, what are they? They are the lion, they are the shore, ox, Taurus, they are the eagle, and then they are, of course, man, the recipient of these three basic energies. The eagle is a central column. The ox always, true to form, remains the left column. Left column. And we explained why he has that unique characteristic when we discussed the month of Taurus, the sign of Taurus, in a previous lecture. But here, the Zohar provides us with a clue that you think because it is in the south, therefore it is chesed. And like astrologers will tell you, Aries is a sharing individual. Why? He's the first. He's in Kav Yamin. He's in the first month. He's in the sharing month. He's under the influence of sharing. In fact, that was the whole business between Egypt and the Jew. The Jew took the Aries, which was the god of Egypt. Why was it the god of Egypt? Why was it the god of Egypt? Because it was the epitome of desire to receive for oneself alone. Pesach converted that whole idea into a sharing concept. So it's sharing. And that's why Reuven is located in the south. Reuben is located in the south. However, that is not all there is to Reuben. If you just had that idea, which you can acquire in conventional astrology, that would not by and within itself permit you to connect and master the positive energy of that month. It wouldn't be enough. It would be like Libra, no decision. Great to understand it, No decision. What's the good of that? Sharing. How many people are become frustrated after giving? Oh, gave too much. Oh, he wasn't worth it. I mean, I can give you 1,000 reasons why someone, after he has shared, then has second thoughts about what he did. Why? He's a sharing individual. Because that by in itself, it doesn't take care of every situation in Aries. Because there is a negative quality in Aries as well. How do you control that? How do you take care of that situation? So now we return to the Zohar. He says both Yehuda and Ruvain consist of both qualities, central column and the right column. Then they appear to be the same, right? No. Yehuda has the distinction while he encompasses and embodies both qualities, central column and right column, but the dominant factor is central. The dominant factor is central. Shu Tiferet. And therefore, because he is of the, because the dominant energy intelligence of Yehuda is central, therefore, if you recall, where did he encamp? In the east. Why the east? We went through all that, because the east is symbolic of what the Jew maybe is not all the times representing, and that is restriction. Not to grab everything that comes his way. A little restriction. That is central column. That was Yehuda. That is what, when we say we pray to the east, forget about which direction. If you're not concentrating on central column, but you're just praying to the east, and every Bet HaKnesset, if you're on the western side of Jerusalem, prays to the east, it's a robotic consciousness with the establishment of all the connections, but you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what Mizrach means. Mizrach means, in a word, central column. Ella, like we said before, because the central column makes manifest right column, then you don't have to worry about drawing energy, as we learned in Talmud Esesfirot. Just put out the energy of restriction. Put out the energy of restriction. You would be amazed how the energy comes back. Push it away, it comes back. A paradox, but take a look at the bulb. It operates with the same features and principles. Okay? Therefore, he is also referred to, Yehuda is also, I use the word also, referred to as right column. Now we understand why he rules over Cancer, water. It seems to be contradictory. Shu Chesed. And therefore, in Yehuda we have the angel Michael, which is Chesed. All right? Ruvain, and why do we need Michael? Because he is the angel that rules. He is the angel that rules. And if you don't call him, and you're concentrating on Chesed, but you don't mention his name, you don't connect without even knowing. But if you don't have the clue, Michael is that angel. You call him, he comes. If you don't call him, he won't come. Therefore, if we're concentrating on right column, you've got to concentrate on the angel of Michael.
I have maybe a stupid question. If you have two friends that are named Aryeh and Michael, you're supposed to say Yehuda and Michael.
His name is Yehuda and Michael?
No.
Oh, you mean two different...
Yeah. And in that period of time, you're in touch with them obviously every day, and you call them. Would the Malach comes in, even though you're not... If you're mentioning the name, but you're not conscious of what you want from him, he'll come. He'll ask you, what do you want? You may not hear him when he says, what do you want? Right? That's the problem. But we learned in Talmud Esesfirot, you just say, I want. You know what happens?
It immediately comes. But somehow you don't feel that he came because you didn't do what was necessary. But without calling him, then nothing is happening. Without dialing the telephone, nothing happens, despite the fact that you have all this equipment. That is Yehuda. Now, what is Ruvain? Hu me'etzem b'chinat kav yamin. His intrinsic, dominating energy intelligence is Yamin. And once that is the dominating energy intelligence, therefore, says the Zohar, he was in camp where? In Darom, in the south. Now, what is Nisiyah? You read in the English translation, which again is translated correctly, but it has no meaning. Vayisa, and they traveled. Again, we ask, what's the purpose of traveling? But also know that, just like when we take out the Torah, we say Vayhi bin Soah ha'aron. And when they carried the ark, what does it mean they carried the ark? You mean physically? If you carry the ark, you've got it all? The answer is no. Nisiyah says the Zohar, making connections with the awesome power of the cosmos. That's what Nisiyah means. Vayisa, they carried. They may not have even moved. This whole thing could be an illusion. The traveling 40 years in the wilderness may be an illusion. In fact, I would prefer referring to it as an illusion because, I mean, there was a little area there. What did they do? Just go around in a circle 40 years? Is that what they were doing? The answer is that's not what we're addressing ourselves to. We're not talking about where they went, where they camped, where they started moving, and when they started moving. We are talking about how they drew that awesome power of the cosmos. So therefore, the intrinsic and essential characteristic of Ruvain was right column. And therefore he was, when it says he was located in the south, it means because it means Yamin. It's right and it's Chesed. Ruvain.
Was it Yehuda?
No, Yehuda, intrinsic energy intelligence is central. Is central.
It's central on the right.
What's that?
Yehuda is also central on the right.
Yes. Why? Because central brings right. Because central brings right. All right? Why is he called central? Because he also reveals some energy to the left. What does that mean? What does that mean? He goes on to explain it, but I'll explain it to you. And therefore, it's Nesha. Where is high noon? Where is high noon? High noon, not the movie. High noon. So nobody answered me. South. High noon. High noon, midday, noon, N-O-O-N. We will be discussing, but Jonas is so into this parsha, he already associated nun with the letter nun, which we will be discussing shortly. Wow. Complete loss. I just gave a little spiel here that you're completely into it. No, all right, okay.
It's so clear, it's so
right.
Clear. Yes, I'm lost,
Yeah, it happens. In midday, the sun is in the south. Now, why is it midday in the south? The sun could move very quickly, and let's say the day is 12 hours or 6 hours. It can move very quickly and be in the west. Who says it has to move this way? It can move faster in the morning, slower in the afternoon. I mean, why is it that way? Why is it that way? How come it works out that high noon, midday should be in the central? Because when it begins to move towards the left direction, right? If you're the sun, then it's moving in the left, right? It begins from the right side. As if let's say this is south, right? He starts from the right, from the east side, which is the right of him. What's the right side of south?
That's exactly. The right side of south is looking at the east.
That's right.
If you're looking at the east, Reuven is on the south, therefore he's on your right-hand side.
That is correct.
And the north is on your left-hand side. I don't know what's the order.
That's right. No, that's right. And he's beginning to go westerly, right? The reason for that is, why is that? Because he also, not that his intrinsic characteristic is left, but to provide energy also for the left column. While it's waning, but nevertheless the sun is shining. Is that correct? Now why could there be some positivity? Once it wanes, we know that it's indicative of only left column energy. Is that correct? Like we said, Newsweek said between 5 and 7, most crimes are committed in the entire universe. Well, or all over the earth, right? But it's in the entire universe too. But at least between 5 and 7, that's what most crimes are committed. Why between 5 and 7? They don't know, other than the convention that was held. But between 5 and 7, we know that's when the sun is just about exiting. But at 12 o'clock, in order to provide a balance, some balance, between the right and the left, it continues to shine. So why is high noon there? So the sun can provide for the east as well as the west, meaning the left side, also energy. So in effect, while his intrinsic characteristic is not central, but he also makes manifest central. Is that correct? He also makes manifest central. Therefore, if you want to avoid, as we said, don't start something in the afternoon if you want to start a new business, or if you want to get married, don't do it in the afternoon. Right? What? Afternoon weddings? Forget it. Forget it. Forget it.
What's wrong in afternoon talking about business?
Because the sun is waning. And why is the sun waning? Why is it beginning to descend? Because there's a force. The sun is only a material matter. There's a force that is saying, look, you've got power. Sun, you've got power, right? But there is a time when that power has to begin waning, has to become diminished. That's the power. The power of negativity says, I want to rule. And that's why he begins to go down. Because at 12 noon, negativity steps in. But he doesn't disappear. He does not disappear. Like on the 15th day of the month, I should say the 16th day of the month, you also don't get married. Of the Hebrew month, because the moon is going down. Why is the moon going down? The Zohar says, for a very specific reason, but suffice to say that at the 15th day of the month, the moon doesn't shine anymore. But then you'll say, well, wait a second. We all see on the 16th day the moon shines, right? That means what? That it's got energy. It's giving off energy. The Zohar says no, zero, blank. But how do you explain that there's still light? Until the 15th, he says that's perfect. There's complete revelation, because that's why there's a full moon, meaning complete revelation. On the 16th day, in fact, it's just going down a little. So let's say it's going down like the sun, right? It's going down. No, he says, there's no more energy. But then you'll say, how come it still seems to have life to itself? It's the same way as you chop off the head of a chicken. You ever see the chicken? What happens? It drops dead and doesn't move anymore. Is that right? No. That's the way the Zohar describes it. There's no energy there. You know, it's like they say it's all over, but for the clapping, it's all over with. What's taking place afterwards is not energy, like that chicken. There's no energy anymore. It's finished. But there's still movement. What?
So you're saying that in the morning is the best time to open a business?
The morning is the best time.
Okay, now the married.
What's that? Order? Now you say order get married. How come it should be under the stars? We'll come to that right away. We didn't come to Marav yet, right? When it's completely. We didn't come to that yet. All right? In any event, what are the clues here? Nesher. Nesher, we said in the holy beast, it's another code for another type of energy. In the four beasts, the holy beast, Nesher, the eagle, is central column, brings the manifestation of central column. What does that mean? That high noon permits energy still to continue from the sun to the left side also. So it's kind of not completely balancing, but at least it's providing the left side also with energy, meaning there is somewhat of a balance. In other words, it's not like the moon where it's completely cut off from any form of energy. Here, the fact that we call Nesher after 12 o'clock, if we call Nesher after 12 o'clock, we still have a continuity of the energy continuing. If for whatever reason you sat down to discuss and go into a new business, right, and for whatever reason it still keeps going after 12 o'clock, what should you do? Cancel the meeting? You can't. What?
Go to lunch.
Go to lunch, right? Or you can call Nesher. I don't mean Nesher beer, but you can call Nesher, the eagle, right? After 12 o'clock noon. After 12 o'clock noon. That's why suddenly Ruvain is considered also to have this aspect of Nesher. Why? For our benefit. It's actually a right column energy. It's right column energy. But there are negative aspects to right column. Giving too much, right? Giving too much. What is the sun in effect? What does central column say? There too, what should you do? Stop. A father or a parent can smother and murder a child with too much sharing. Is that correct? In other words, even in the sharing, to have balance, you've got to restrict to whatever extent. So therefore, the Malach Uriel, which is also central column here, is brought into play because here we need two aspects of central column. In Yehuda, he by himself was enough for central column. His intrinsic characteristic is central. All right, we'll have a break over here.